All right, we are on the air, and I'm very excited about this chat I'm going to have. My name is Ann White. I'm the founder of the Creating Calm Network and also co-partner in the Creating Calm Network Publishing Group, and we have a series called Writer's Toolbox. And today we have an author with us, an author whose latest book is been published by Hay House, and this book is Losing Amma, Finding Home, by Amma Girish. And Amma, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. It's got to be exciting to have your book out. It's a beautiful cover and a beautiful book.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be talking to you today.
And I read Amma's book, and it was one of those where it was a weekend, and I sat on the couch, and I have to admit, I did not get off the couch except for food and toiletries, because you just held me spellbound the whole weekend. I was with you flying back and forth to India at doctor's appointments, making my way in a new country. It was just a page turner, and to say that for a memoir, that says a lot about your writing style as well. And one of the things I was thinking, was this a journal you kept? It was so vivid. How did you remember back to those times, or were you keeping a journal during that time?
Yeah, like I said in the book, and like you know, I was only 10 days old in Chicago when my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. So my husband, who knows me really well, said, let's drive to Barnes & Noble and you buy yourself a journal, because that's one way you're going to be able to make sense of this whole thing. Make sure you write about your feelings. So we drove over to B&N, picked up a journal for me, and I started writing from that very day, the day the diagnosis came in. And I wrote right through her, her illness, everything I experienced, my going back to India, coming back to Chicago, my feelings, the doctor's appointment. So I really had a record of everything that happened. That was a huge help when I started writing the book, because I didn't start keeping the journal as a way of, what if I write a book about this someday? That was never even a thought when this whole thing happened. But in hindsight, it was a good idea that I did, because that really helped me out when it came to structuring everything, the events and how they happened. The other thing I also did was I kept a folder of all my email communication with my sister, who was with my mother at the time and through the entire time of her illness, and in the last moments when my mother transitioned. So going back and reading those emails also gave me a lot of perspective on what was going on and what were we saying to each other, and what were the test results, the doctor's appointments, and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Because like I say, it was so beautifully written that the reader will be with you on this journey. And many of us at this age have lost our mother. So we can identify to that degree, but I think what makes your story more poignant is, like you say, you had just moved across the globe, 10 days in a brand new country, a brand new city, with no support here, and with all of the action going on in your home in India. That had to be, I can't even think of words, I can't identify with that part of your story. How was, it must have just been, did you regret even moving it sometimes? Or you also had the part of having your sister then doing the load for you, because you were here instead of there for times. That was an incredible part of your story.
Yeah, I was angry at God. I raged at God more than anything, because I was asking him why he brought us all the way across the ocean to drop this bombshell on us, because my mother and father had lived away from me. They just stayed 5 minutes away from where we lived, so I was always readily available to them when she was unwell, or when my dad needed to go to the hospital, or when they needed groceries. I was always there helping them with anything they needed. And then we move and this happens. So I just didn't understand the cosmic reasoning behind that. So I spent a lot of time being really mad at God. it felt very disconnected to just be able to, have to talk to my sister and get all the information of what was going on with doctors' visits and how she was doing and responding to treatment. So yeah, I felt really, really like I didn't belong here and I didn't belong there. I felt like I was floating in limbo, in a manner of speaking.
Right. Yeah, I could sense that. And one of the things about the age of having an ailing parent, you also had a daughter who was, again, new to this country, starting high school. So you were in that sandwich generation trying to balance your daughter's needs versus your mother's needs. And then I could feel the pull and tug from the sibling dynamics. So you must have felt, and it was very clear in the book, and you were very brave in writing it, all of the various pulls and tugs, even your beloved husband, who you can see is such a, I could sense that he's a pillar of strength for you, was kind of in the pull and tug. How did that go for you?
I was really upset and hurt that I couldn't be here when my daughter first stepped into an American high school, her very first time in an American high school, because she had to do summer school. She had some missing credits and she had to make those classes up. And I wasn't here. I was back home in India with my mother and my sister. So that was really hard for me. My mind was here, wondering what she was facing and going through, and the fact that she didn't have me by her side as she was transitioning to that school system. And then there was the other dynamic. My husband was trying to get started in the US. He was with the same company, but it was a time of transition because he was figuring out his job scenario. He needed to travel, and he had to put that on hold for a bit while I was gone. Fortunately, my in-laws were in the States at the time. They were living with my sister-in-law for a couple of months, and they dropped their plans and they moved to our home. We lived in an apartment at the time, so they moved to our apartment so that I could go back to India and be with my mother. And it was a constant tug and pull and push, like you're saying. My youngest sister is the one who was staying with my parents at the time, and she cared for them. She was the primary caregiver through both their long-term illnesses. My brother was here. My other sister was in the Middle East at the time. So we were all communicating through email and telephone, and it just felt really surreal and disconnected most of the time.
And through all of the family dynamics, because no family is exempt from having different dynamics, it sounds like your sister's, her name Maya?
Maya.
Yeah, she really stood up to the task, and it didn't feel like she made you feel guilty in any way. Whereas sometimes the caregiver, sibling, is more of the martyr. I have to do it. But it looked like she really was just stood up to it and was, I don't want to say the hero of a story, but was there for you as well as your parents.
Yeah, and I think part of that was because I had always been home in India and supporting her. Every time she traveled, I would be the one that was managing the household, looking out for my parents. And so she'd always had that support from me. And when we moved, we had no indication that Amma was going to be sick in a few days, a couple of weeks later, in fact. So I think she understood that there was nothing I could do. That was the way life panned out. And she just drew strength from me through our phone conversations, through emails. Even today, she tells me how much she missed me. Just this morning, I got a text from her saying she finished reading the memoir all over again. It was tears and celebration. And she says, I wish you were here with me. I want to give you a big hug, and all I can do is send you a virtual hug. So she really, bore the brunt of the caregiving, but never really made any of us feel that we weren't around.
Yeah, I could sense that she really did it in a loving way, loved the support you gave her, but was also understanding when you had to go back to America.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
When your mother took her last breath, can you share that part of your story with us?
I wasn't in India at the time, so what I know of that moment is what Maya shared with me, my sister Maya shared with me. Apparently, she had been deteriorating very rapidly over the last week of her life, and she wasn't getting out of bed much. She wasn't eating. She'd stopped drinking things completely. And her brother, sister-in-law, and my grandma had come over for a visit that evening. And she sat with them for a while in the living room and made conversation. Then she started to get very exhausted and went to bed. And my grandma was saying to her, "Don't worry, you're going to be okay. God will take care of you." And she said to her, "Only God can take care of me at this time. Only God can help me turn this around."
So
And she
she
went to bed.
knowing it sounds like that it was near.
Yeah, yeah. And my sister was in the kitchen getting dinner ready when she heard my mother call out to her. And she went into the bedroom where my mother was lying on the bed and saw that my mother's eyes were rolling back and her back was arched. And the nurse who was with my mother at the time said, "Something's going on here. She's really serious. We need to rush her to hospital." So my sister suddenly realizes that my brother-in-law had just stepped out to go to the pharmacy to get some medicines, and she didn't know what to do. She ran out of the home. She yelled for the neighbors. They came in, and they actually bodily carried her. They picked her up, and then my brother-in-law drove in, so they were able to put her in the car, and she was lying in the back seat with her head in the nurse's lap. With my brother-in-law was driving, and my sister was sitting in the passenger seat. And as they were driving, she breathed her last. So they didn't even get to the hospital, and she died right outside the temple, which is supposed to be very significant according to the Hindu tradition and culture. And that's the way my mother would have wanted it, knowing her. But she died between the home and the hospital.
And like you say, the beauty was right by the temple, and that was a major part of her life because you shared part of the temple visits with the readers too, what it was like and what it was like for you to be there as well. Because in a way, your feeling of the temple was different than your mom's at that point in your life.
Yeah, I was the questioning brat. So I wanted to know all the reasons why I had to do certain things and why there were all these rules and rituals, why we were performing them. And my mother most times didn't have the answers. She said to me, "We never asked questions growing up. We weren't even allowed to. Our parents just told us to do something and we obeyed unquestioningly. And why are you asking me all these questions?" And I would say, "No, I want to know the answers. I want to know why I have to do something before I do it." Many times she didn't have the answer, but she kind of had to put up with me and my stubborn resistance to many things.
Your mother sounds like she was truly a remarkable woman. Like more than a strength in the family, it sounded like she was a strength in the neighborhood. And I don't know if you can share that, or it might just be from reading the book, we will see that. But it really seemed like the energy all around her was very, very positive, and she was very loved in her neighborhood, you know, the shopkeepers and everyone.
Yeah, yeah. She was very loved by all our neighbors, no matter where we lived. She had this quality of being able to draw people to her. Within 5 minutes of people meeting her, they'd be sharing their, most intimate secrets and stories. And she shared her stories. She had no shame about anything that was going on in her life. She was just this very open people person. And she had a way of making friends no matter where we moved to. Within weeks, she'd know people who lived across from us and, on the right side of our house and the left side of our house, and she knew their stories, knew their extended family members. She exchanged, news and also magazines and recipes. They would come to her if they needed anything like lentils or coffee powder, sugar. So she was just this very kind, neighborly person, and that's just who she was. And the people that worked for us, like the maid who cleaned our home, the man who ironed our clothes, for those of you who don't know, those services are very easily available in India, and we have people to take care of these aspects of our daily lives for a very small payment. So they would constantly come in the flower cellar. They would come and go on a daily basis. And they all knew my mother would talk to her, have conversations, tell her their stories, what was going on in their lives. And these were the people who came up to me after she passed away and told me how much she had meant to them and how much they were going to miss her. So hearing that from them was just very meaningful and very poignant.
Right. And her life wasn't always that easy either, because your father had, what, it was an accident, or he had a situation that probably made him not the easiest person to live with. And yet it looked like she, again, rose to the occasion and was with him with love as well.
Yeah, my father was an alcoholic for many years. He sobered up, I'm going to say about 20 years before he passed away. And then he went on to become a very, a member who was looked up to in the AA community. He helped many other suffering alcoholics and was sort of like a father figure to many in that community. My mother always cared for him, no matter what he was doing, no matter how badly he behaved through those days. She always stood by him. She was the rock in his life. And then he suffered a road accident. This was in 1993, which left him with a brain injury. So he just almost overnight became someone we didn't even recognize. His personality changed, his behavior changed. He had severe amnesia attacks, and so made up things about his life that weren't true. And because of his own personal frustration, took out a lot on my mother. But nothing fazed her. She was like this shock absorber. She was able to take it all in her stride and still serve him. He always came first in her life, and her constant devotion to him always amazed me. I didn't always understand it, but when I look back from the perspective of being married now, I realize how special she was to him. And many other family members talk about their union. The fact that my mother did what she did for my father is spoken about almost like a family lore today.
Hmm. And you know, it had that other turn to it too. After she had passed and your dad was still suffering, maybe there was another incident in his memory, you dealt with the poignancy that many older people have. Some of them, when they're in other cases, like into dementia or Alzheimer's, when they lose a spouse, how they still hold on that maybe it didn't happen, or you know, so how your dad was dealing with the loss of his wife was a very poignant part of your book. And I don't know if you can share parts of that with us.
Yeah, he kind of alternated between reality and fantasy to an extent. He had moments when he didn't remember that she'd passed away. So he would say to me, when I went back on a vacation, for instance, he said to me, she's gone away somewhere on a long trip, but she usually would never travel without telling me, do you know where she's gone? And so I had to go with the flow. It was really hard and sad, you know, on one level to have to tell him that, yeah, she's gone on this trip and I don't know when she'll be back. I mean, it just hurt everything in me to say that. But there was no way to get him to understand or to expose him to the brutal cruelty that she was never coming back. And I felt like that was enough. It's like a child that asks you a difficult question for which there's no easy answer. You give the child what the child is able to absorb and understand and what's relevant for that time. So we had to treat my father in the same way. But right after my mother passed away, he suffered a seizure. And I think that was his response to the trauma of loss. So he was in hospital right away, and the team from hospital brought him home for the last rites. And he was like a child that was lost. I mean, that probably was the second most painful moment in my life. The most painful was losing my mother, but a close second was watching my father being this broken child, feeling bereft and abandoned that my mother was gone, and his grief and pain was so raw to witness. I think he was able to go to that place because of his brain injury. Had he been a complete man in full possession of his mental faculties, I think he would have been a little more restrained. I think we saw his grief in all its rawness because he was suffering from this changed brain scenario.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that because it was very raw and very childlike and innocent as well.
Yeah.
One of the things in your show, Uma's the host of the Grammar of Grief. She's also a blogger on the Grammar of Grief, the author of other books on grieving. But one of the things you say is you try to help others turn pain into purpose. And in your memoir, sharing your own grief, um, and it's such a grief because, again, it's more than the loss of a mother. It's the helplessness of being across the country and trying to balance things, across the globe. How did you turn that pain into purpose?
It didn't start out as a conscious way to transform pain into purpose. But I knew that I had to move beyond the pain. I couldn't live there forever. I had a daughter, I had a home, I had a husband. I had to wake up and find new meaning. But I was living in the midst of this huge existential angst. Why am I here? What's life all about? What is my purpose? And I realized I had to just wake up every morning and do what I was meant to do. So I completely surrendered to God, to the universe, to my higher self, and said, help me to do what I need to do today to make someone else's life better. Because I knew from experience, I had watched my father do that long enough, that he was lit up from within when he served. When he became a stalwart in the AA community and people looked up to him and whole families would come up to him and say, because of you, my husband is sober. Because of you, he's going to AA meetings. I saw what that did to people and I knew there was some truth in that. And so when I had to go through this pain of loss, I recognized that that would be my salvation. So I woke up every morning and I said a prayer. It's actually Mary Ann Williamson's prayer. Where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say and to whom? I would say that every morning. I say that even today. And I would say, just lead me to what I need to do next. Help me serve someone else. And I realized that as I served other people, my own grief began to lessen, began to be healed, began to be transmuted. And that's when the truth hit me. It is a universal truth that in healing others and serving others lies our own personal healing. And that's the only thing you can do with any kind of pain you're going through. Ask, how is this pain relevant to my journey? What are the lessons for me? And how am I meant to serve from what I'm experiencing?
And one of the things in your serving, you worked, was it a hospice or just a assisted living? You can share with us, but you shared so many different stories of how you connected with people who had stories to tell and nobody to listen to them. And probably you got yourself in a little challenge because you were there really to teach computer skills, and yet you realized the need for people to say their stories. So that was a very special part of your book. It just was heartwarming to see that you were there for other people.
Yeah, when we moved, the economy was in a downward turn. So the only job I got was a part-time position at this retirement community, and the job involved teaching basic computer skills to seniors. And not many of them were willing to come to a computer lesson with me because they felt intimidated, and I don't really blame them. I mean, who wants to do technology at 85 and 90, right?
And we're so afraid to break something if we touch it, yeah.
But the one thing they loved to do was share their stories with me. And as they started to talk and share about the parts of their lives that were kept hidden for many years, I sensed a real connection. And I started to become a friend and a companion and a caregiver to an extent, not just a computer instructor. Many of them didn't even want computer lessons, but they loved to talk.
Mm-hmm.
So there we formed connections, and in helping them make sense of their stories, being a listening ear, being a willing presence, all of that, those were the lessons that really saved my life.
And I could see the joy that you brought to people who their families might have even come to visit, but they didn't listen. And you were the listener. And what a special gift that you give back, even though it goes both ways. Are you still doing that kind of work, Uma?
I am. I have been with the same retirement community for 6 years now. I facilitate a weekly group called My Life Stories. We sit around a table and we talk about life stories. They get to tell me about the Depression era, what it was like growing up through a world war. They talk about victory gardens, things I didn't know, big band music. So I have such a rich education coming my way every Monday for that 1 hour. And in turn, I shine the spotlight on them and help them feel special, because my message really is we need to validate the elderly. We need to make them feel that they are rich treasure houses of stories and life experiences, but they don't feel that way. And I feel like it's my mission to help them feel validated, feel accepted and included, that they still have value.
Mm. And that really comes out in the book. One of the tips I'd like you to share, or the thoughts with other writers who are writing memoirs, is how were you able to go back with your notes, with your journal, with the emails, and write so richly? Were there days you just cried your eyes out? Was it cathartic? Was it painful? How did you get back to that place after you'd already mourned it a great deal, to relive it?
It was very, very difficult to write the book. There were days when I would just be in the middle of writing a scene and be crying so hard I would have to get up and walk away and come back to it later. The one thing that really helped me at the time was working with a writers group. So any aspiring memoirist, I would encourage you to find a writing group, or if you don't like the idea of a group, find a writing buddy, someone who'll keep you accountable and give you critiques on what you've written and hold your hand when the writing gets tough. So that's one piece of advice I'd like to share. The other is that I always felt connected to the why of the book. So why was I writing this book? It was to spread my message. It wasn't just about sharing my story. It was about telling people that grief isn't a dead end. Loss isn't a dead end. There is life beyond, and you can find purpose and meaning and move through pain. So I knew the book had a bigger journey than I could even see at that point. And that is what will keep you going. What is your motivation for the book and for its journey in the world? That, if you're clear about that, that keeps you going on the days when the writing is hard and scary and difficult.
Right. How long did it take you when you started to write? In other words, did you write every day? Did you write certain days of the week? What was your method for actually thinking, I'm going to write this book, and then getting it done?
Yeah, I wrote almost every day, maybe 4-5 days a week, and I submitted weekly chapters to my writers group. So we had a deadline for submission, and I would write to that deadline because I wanted to make progress on the book and get it written. So I was very disciplined about the writing process. It took me, I'm going to say, anywhere between 8 to 10 months to finish the book, the first manuscript. Mm-hmm. And then I started work on the revisions, which took me a couple more months.
Right. And Mazel Tov, congratulations and happy dance. How wonderful that Hay House saw the brilliance in your book, which isn't hard to do, but I'm glad that they did that. And it's got to feel neat being a published Hay House author.
It is. It's a blessing.
Open the box. Here's your books. I saw that one picture of you holding your book, and the joy, actually, in that accomplishment.
Yeah.
That's off to you. Yeah. So the beautiful cover as well.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, it's such a blessing. This was a dream come true. I've always wanted to be a Hay House author. I've read Wayne Dyer and Louise Hay and Cheryl Richardson forever, and to belong to that elite club is such a blessing. I just feel blessed and very grateful for the journey. So my message, what I feel really passionate about sharing, is that if you're going through pain of the worst kind, know that the universe is holding your hand and supporting you. I could never have seen this happen, but when I said yes and put my hand up and expressed my willingness to serve, that's when the doors started to open. So that's how it'll be for you as well. So believe in the fact that you can move beyond the pain, even though it feels impossible today.
I love that, Uma. And having read Uma's book, obviously it's sad, and there are times when you just feel the same grief, but it's also such an uplifting human story. And it's nice to step into someone else's humanity, to get to know them better, to get to find the similarities and embrace the differences. So my feeling when I finished the book was like, first, wow. And then I really missed you guys for a while, Uma. It was like your whole family. You know, I missed your sister, I missed your husband, your daughter, you. It felt like I was embraced into your family during that time. And that says a lot about you as a writer. You just brought the reader right in. So thank you.
That's amazing, because just today I had an email from someone else who's read the book who said, I've been thinking and thinking about your book. I'm not able to move beyond it. I woke up one night and was very nostalgic and looking through my family albums. It really touched me in a deep way. So for a writer to hear that feels like the ultimate prize. It's like the Pulitzer Prize.
Oh, yeah. And I recommend it to anybody, no matter where you are in your life, because it embraces humanity. And then you can be a part of Uma's family for a while, which is a really neat feeling. So, you know, I feel like we're kin now. But take the time to treat yourself to losing Amma, finding home. And, you know, Uma, I have a dyslexic situation, so oftentimes I make a mistake and I write losing Amma, finding hope. But it still works, you know, in a way.
It works.
I know it's home, but it's also a hope that's there too. So, you know, in my mind, that works just as well. But, so anyway, thank you for sharing this beautiful story with us, Uma, for having the courage to go back and write it, to feel your pain again, and to show us the joy, not the joy, the purpose. But I think there's also joy, too, in your story groups. When you're working with other people, you bring them joy and light.
Thank you so much for having me, Anne. I love talking about my book, and thank you for giving me this forum to express my thoughts about it. I love how you support me and everything I do in the world, and you're a very dear friend. I'm so grateful for you in my life.
And now I'm family.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, you can tell everybody you reach the book and be part of Uma's family, and that feels good. But again, thanks. And what I was thinking is, too, I had one more thought about your book, and it just escaped me. But, oh, well, I'll probably blog about it or something like that, because it's a life-changing book. So anyone who's, maybe even if you're not a memoir fan, I really don't read very many memoirs, but reading this just swept me away. So make sure you put it on your reading list. You will be better off for it. And again, Uma, thank you for being you, and we will be in touch. It's all good. Oh, I know my question. Do you ever feel that Amma is watching you or is supporting this, or what she would say when she saw this book?
All the time. In fact, when I wasn't finding too much success with my novel, which I had written before the memoir, I think about 25 agents rejected that manuscript. I was talking to a medium at the time, and she said, your mother says not to give up. That a book is coming through you. Don't give up. Just be patient. So I know she's held my hand through every word of this. I just know that she's watching over me. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my feeling too, is that even as I was reading it, her spirit came through so strong, and I was hoping that you felt her guiding you, and even maybe shaking your pen a little on some of those parts too. Yeah, but she is a blessing, and I'm glad I had a chance to feel her essence through you. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye, everybody, and thank you for tuning in.